What if I told you that Stephen King literally threw his first published novel in the trash? That he was so high on cocaine during the 1980s that he doesn't remember writing entire books? Or that a near-fatal car accident in 1999 seemed ripped from the pages of one of his own terrifying stories? Welcome to the complete journey through Stephen King's incredible bibliography, a masterclass in persistence, creativity, and the power of telling stories that tap into our deepest fears. I'm about to take you through over 60 novels, 200 short stories, and the fascinating life of the man they call the King of Horror. But first, let me share something that will absolutely blow your mind. In 1973, a 26-year-old Stephen King was living in a trailer with his wife Tabitha and their young children. He was teaching high school English for $6,400 a year, and they couldn't even afford a phone. His wife worked at Dunkin' Donuts to help make ends meet. King had been writing for years, collecting rejection slips like some people collect stamps. Then came Carrie, a story about a bullied teenage girl with telekinetic powers. King wasn't even sure about the story. In fact, he thought it was so terrible that he crumpled up the first few pages and threw them in the trash. But here's where fate intervened. His wife Tabitha found those pages, read them, and convinced him to finish the story. What happened next changed everything. Doubleday bought Carrie for $2,500. But then the paperback rights sold for $400,000. That's equivalent to about $2 million today. Suddenly, Stephen King went from struggling teacher to literary sensation overnight. But Carrie was just the beginning of an empire that would span 5 decades and redefine horror fiction forever. Let's dive into the chronological journey through King's literary kingdom, starting with those early works that established him as the master of fear. After Carrie's success in 1974, King didn't rest on his laurels. The very next year, he unleashed Salem's Lot upon the world. This wasn't just another vampire story. This was Peyton Place meets Dracula, as King himself described it. He took the classic vampire mythology and dropped it into small-town New England, creating something entirely fresh and terrifying. Here's a fascinating detail most people don't know. King was inspired to write Salem's Lot while teaching Dracula to his high school students. He wondered, what would happen if vampires invaded a small American town? The result was a novel that many critics consider one of the finest vampire stories ever written. Then came 1977's The Shining, and this is where things get really interesting. King wrote The Shining after staying at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. The hotel was nearly empty, and the isolation sparked his imagination. He envisioned a story about a family trapped in a haunted hotel for the winter, where the father's alcoholism and the supernatural forces would create a perfect storm of terror. But here's what's absolutely mind-blowing. King's own battles with alcoholism were intensifying during this period. He was essentially writing about his own demons, creating Jack Torrance as a dark reflection of what he feared he might become. The line between author and character was terrifyingly thin. And speaking of The Shining, we cannot ignore one of the most famous feuds in literary and cinematic history. When Stanley Kubrick adapted The Shining in 1980, King hated it, absolutely despised it. He called it a beautiful film, but like a big, beautiful Cadillac with no engine inside it. King felt that Kubrick completely missed the emotional core of the story. Where King had written a tragedy about a good man succumbing to his demons, Kubrick created a cold, calculating study of madness. The tension between these two giants was legendary. Kubrick even made a subtle dig at King in the film. He changed Jack's car from red to yellow, then showed a red car crushed under a truck in the background. It was Kubrick's way of saying he was destroying King's version to create his own. But King's productivity didn't slow down. In fact, it was about to explode. The late 1970s and early 1980s were when King truly hit his stride. The Stand, published in 1978, was his epic post-apocalyptic masterpiece. At over 800 pages, it was the novel that King said took him the longest to write, and the one his longtime readers still seem to like the best. Then came a rapid-fire succession of classics. The Dead Zone in 1979, exploring themes of precognition and moral responsibility. Firestarter in 1980, about a young girl with pyrokinetic abilities. Cujo in 1981, the terrifying tale of a rabid dog that became a metaphor for unstoppable evil. But here's where King's story takes a dark turn that rivals any of his fiction. During the 1980s, as Stephen King's success reached unprecedented heights, his personal life was spiraling into darkness. He was drinking a case of beer a day and using cocaine regularly. His writing sessions became manic, drug-fueled marathons. He would write for hours, high out of his mind, producing massive novels at an alarming pace. The Tommyknockers, published in 1987, was written almost entirely under the influence of cocaine. King himself later called it an awful book and admitted that his drug use had severely impacted his judgment. Even more shocking, there's an urban legend that King wrote the entire novel Cujo during a weekend cocaine binge and has no memory of writing it at all. King's addiction was so severe that he was using anything that would alter his consciousness. 2 packs of cigarettes a day, Listerine mouthwash for the alcohol content, NyQuil cold medicine, Xanax, Valium, you name it. If it would change how he felt, he was all for it. His wife Tabitha would find him passed out at his desk in the morning, sometimes lying in his own vomit. She watched the man she loved slowly destroying himself, all while he continued to produce best-selling novels at an incredible pace. Then came the intervention that saved his life. In 1987, Tabitha King had reached her breaking point. She gathered their children and some close friends, then did something that required incredible courage. She went through Stephen's office and collected all his drug paraphernalia: cocaine spoons, bags of white powder, beer cans, bottles of mouthwash, prescription pills, everything. She dumped it all on the living room floor in front of Stephen and their assembled loved ones. The message was clear: get clean or lose everything that mattered. Tabitha told him that if he didn't get sober, she would leave and take the children with her. That intervention changed everything. King entered recovery and has been sober for over 3 decades now. And here's the beautiful irony. His greatest fear was that he wouldn't be able to write without drugs and alcohol. Instead, his post-sobriety work includes some of his most acclaimed novels. Misery, published in 1987 just as he was getting clean, is actually a metaphor for his cocaine addiction. King himself said, "Misery is a novel about cocaine. Annie Wilkes is cocaine. She was my #1 fan." The book's themes of captivity, dependency, and the toxic relationship between creator and substance were drawn directly from his own experience, and the productivity didn't stop. If anything, it accelerated. The 1990s saw King enter a new phase of his career. The Green Mile, published as a serial novel in 1996, showed his range beyond pure horror. Hearts in Atlantis explored coming-of-age themes with supernatural elements. Bag of Bones blended ghost story with literary fiction. But perhaps his most ambitious project was the Dark Tower series, an 8-book epic that began in 1982 and concluded in 2012. This wasn't just horror. It was a genre-bending saga that combined Western, fantasy, science fiction, and horror elements. The series connects many of King's other works, creating a shared universe that spans multiple realities. King has often said that Roland Deschain, the last gunslinger, is his most important character. The Dark Tower series represents King's magnum opus, his attempt to create a mythology as rich and complex as Tolkien's Middle-earth. Then, on June 19, 1999, life imitated art in the most terrifying way possible. Stephen King was taking his daily walk along Route 5 in Lovell, Maine, when a blue Dodge van struck him from behind. The driver, Brian Smith, was distracted by his dog moving around in the back of the van. King was thrown 14 feet from the road, landing in a depression in the ground with massive injuries. His spine was chipped, his hip was fractured, his leg was broken in 9 places, and his lung was punctured. Doctors debated whether to amputate his leg. King's glasses were found in the front seat of the van, the frames bent and twisted but the lenses intact. To this day, King wears those same lenses, saying, "I guess I wanted to say that things we ordinarily see as quite fragile aren't necessarily that fragile." The accident seemed like something from one of King's own novels. As he later wrote, "It occurs to me that I have nearly been killed by a character out of one of my own novels. It's almost funny." He even told his nurses, "In no uncertain terms, don't make any misery jokes." But even this near-death experience couldn't stop the King of Horror. King's recovery was long and painful, but he continued writing. In fact, the accident influenced several of his later works. He finished his Dark Tower series, wrote the acclaimed 11/22/63 about preventing the Kennedy assassination, and continued to publish regularly. His writing routine has remained remarkably consistent throughout his career. Every single day, including holidays and his birthday, King sits down to write from 8 a.m. to noon. He has a specific ritual: a glass of water or cup of tea, a vitamin pill, the same seat, papers arranged the same way. The cumulative purpose of doing these things the same way every day, King explains, seems to be a way of saying to the mind, "You're going to be dreaming soon." He sets a goal of 2,000 words per day, roughly 10 pages. With this disciplined approach, King can complete a novel in about 3 months. His secret? treating writing like a job, not waiting for inspiration. As he famously said, "If you want to be a writer, you must do two things above all others: read a lot and write a lot." King reads 70 to 80 books per year, crediting his voracious reading habit with helping him understand story structure, character development, and the craft of writing. He believes that reading widely is just as important as writing regularly. Now, let's talk about the sheer scope of Stephen King's literary empire. As of 2025, King has published over 60 novels and 200 short stories. His books have sold more than 350 million copies worldwide and have been translated into dozens of languages. But it's not just the quantity, it's the consistency of quality and the incredible range of his imagination. Consider the diversity of his work. The Stand is an epic post-apocalyptic saga. The Green Mile is a touching story about death row and miracles. 11/22/63 is a time-travel thriller centered on the Kennedy assassination. Under the Dome is science fiction about a town trapped under a mysterious barrier. Each book showcases King's ability to master different genres while maintaining his distinctive voice. His influence extends far beyond literature. Over 100 movies and TV shows have been based on King's work. The Shawshank Redemption, often cited as one of the greatest films ever made, is based on a King novella. It, Carrie, Christine, Pet Sematary, The Mist, Dr. Sleep. The list of successful adaptations is staggering, but here's what makes King truly special: his ability to tap into universal human fears and emotions. King's genius lies not in the monsters he creates, but in the humanity he reveals. His vampires, ghosts, and supernatural creatures are merely vehicles for exploring deeper themes: the breakdown of families, the corruption of innocence, the struggle between good and evil, the price of power. Take Pet Sematary, which King himself has called his most frightening book. On the surface, it's about a burial ground that brings the dead back to life. But at its core, it's about grief, the inability to let go, and the terrible consequences of trying to cheat death. King explores what any parent would do if given the chance to bring back a beloved child, regardless of the cost. The Shining isn't really about ghosts in a hotel. It's about alcoholism, domestic violence, and the cycle of abuse. Carrie isn't just about telekinetic powers. It's about bullying, religious extremism, and the rage that builds in those who are powerless. This is why Stephen King's work resonates across cultures and generations. He writes about the monsters inside us all. And his productivity continues to amaze. Even in his 70s, King shows no signs of slowing down. Recent novels like The Institute, If It Bleeds, and Billy Summers prove that his imagination remains as vivid as ever. He's adapted to new technologies, being one of the first major authors to experiment with digital publishing. King's daily routine remains unchanged. Every morning he sits at his desk and creates worlds that will thrill and terrify readers for generations to come. He's proven that creativity doesn't diminish with age. It can deepen and become more refined. So what can we learn from Stephen King's incredible journey? First, persistence is everything. Those rejection slips that filled his wall weren't failures. They were stepping stones. Every no brought him closer to that life-changing yes. King's story reminds us that success often comes to those who refuse to give up. Second, personal struggles can fuel creativity. King's battles with addiction, his near-death experience, his working-class background, all of these experiences informed his writing and made it more authentic. He didn't write in spite of his demons. He wrote because of them. Third, discipline trumps inspiration every time. King doesn't wait for the muse to strike. He shows up every single day and does the work. His 2,000-word daily goal has resulted in one of the most impressive bodies of work in literary history. Finally, reading is the foundation of good writing. King's advice to aspiring writers is simple but profound. If you don't have time to read, you don't have the time or the tools to write. But perhaps most importantly, Stephen King's story reminds us that everyone has the potential to create something meaningful. King came from humble beginnings. His father abandoned the family when he was young. His mother struggled to support them. He worked menial jobs to pay for college. He lived in a trailer and couldn't afford a phone when he started his career. None of that stopped him from becoming one of the most successful authors in history. His story proves that talent, persistence, and hard work can overcome any obstacle. And here's something beautiful about King's success. He's never forgotten where he came from. He and his wife Tabitha donate approximately $4 million per year to libraries, schools, fire departments, and arts organizations in Maine. They've built baseball stadiums, funded literacy programs, and supported countless community initiatives. King once said, "Get busy living or get busy dying." He chose to live, to create, to inspire, to entertain millions of readers around the world. As we wrap up this journey through Stephen King's literary kingdom, remember this: every time you pick up a Stephen King novel, you're not just reading a story. You're experiencing the culmination of decades of craft, struggle, and relentless dedication to the art of storytelling. From that young teacher throwing pages in the trash to the master of horror who redefined an entire genre, King's journey reminds us that our greatest obstacles can become our greatest strengths. His 60-plus novels aren't just books on a shelf. They're testaments to the power of imagination, the importance of persistence, and the incredible things that can happen when we refuse to give up on our dreams. Whether you're a longtime fan or discovering King for the first time, his complete works offer a masterclass in storytelling that spans 5 decades. From Carrie to his latest releases, each book adds another layer to one of the most impressive literary legacies ever created. So the next time you see that familiar name on a book spine, Stephen King, remember the incredible journey behind those words. Remember the struggling teacher who became the king of horror. Remember the man who turned his darkest moments into literary gold. And remember, the best stories are yet to be written. If you've enjoyed diving deep into Stephen King's incredible literary journey, you'll love exploring more amazing author stories and book recommendations at hookedtobooks.com. Subscribe to our channel for more fascinating deep dives into the world's greatest writers, and join our community of passionate book lovers by signing up for our email list. The world of books is vast and wonderful, and we're here to help you navigate every amazing story waiting to be discovered. Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and keep those pages turning.